For many years there was an ongoing war between humans and demons. After many battles and countless deaths, a group of heroes finally reached the Demon King's castle to put an end to it all. But on the way they lost many. Just before they reached the throne room, an evil demon confronted and attacked them. At that moment, Siren told Kyle and Werza to continue ahead while he dealt with the demon alone. Kyle and Werza continued their path, both knowing that Siren would not survive the encounter. Siren went to face the demon. They entered the throne hall, and the moment they stepped in, Kyle was attacked by a wave of dark energy descending from above. He managed to block some of it, but the sheer number was too much for him. At that moment, Werza threw herself in front of him to protect him, creating a protective shield. However, the attack was so powerful it completely obliterated her, and she vanished from the force of the blow. After Werza died, the Demon King finally appeared in person, ready to face the last hero. Kyle, enraged, charged at him without thinking. The Demon King kept firing more and more dark orbs. Kyle barely managed to hide behind a pillar to evade an attack. When he saw the effect of the impact, his heart sank. This attack was called the Erasure, a cursed spell that destroys anything it touches and no one can block it. As long as the Demon King possessed this magic, Kyle knew he could never get close enough to strike a decisive blow. He had no choice but to take a risk. Kyle said to himself that if he released all the energy of the magical stone in his sword at once, he might be able to defeat him. But doing so would most likely kill him as well. He knew he was playing with fire, but there was no other way. Indeed, he unleashed the sword's entire energy, charged with all his strength, broke the Demon King's shield, and stabbed him with a fatal blow. However, his sword shattered completely, and Kyle himself suffered severe critical injury. He saved the world, but in return, he lost everyone he had wanted to protect from the beginning. His friends, his family, his home. Everything was destroyed by the demon, so he felt he had gained nothing. Moments later, Kyle collapsed from his wounds, accepting death because he had nothing left to live for. But suddenly, the Demon King's magical stone reappeared, and the energy within it began to rise uncontrollably. With the Demon King gone, there was no one to control this energy. If it exploded, it would wipe the entire world off the map. Kyle crawled towards the stone, trying to stop it before it exploded. The moment he touched it, he was covered in a very bright white light. He opened his eyes to find himself sleeping in his old childhood bed. He was shocked because this was impossible. He rushed to the window and told himself he must be dreaming, but when he looked out, he saw his village exactly as it was. The same village he had seen burned to the ground long ago due to a demon attack. The sight brought tears to his eyes without him realizing it, but after all he had been through, he still couldn't believe it was all real. Suddenly, his old friend Liza entered the room looking for him. The moment he saw her, he was shocked and frozen in place. Liza noticed he was standing strangely and asked if he was okay, but he couldn't utter a word. He still thought it was all an illusion, but it didn't matter. He was overjoyed to see her and hugged her tightly. Liza was surprised and asked what he was doing, but Kyle was lost in the moment and didn't answer. She tried to push him away, but he held on tight, causing both to lose their balance and fall onto the bed. Embarrassed, she got very angry and slapped him, sending his body spinning 3 times in the air. Kyle fell on the bed, writhing in pain as she yelled at him, asking how he could do such a thing. She didn't understand what had gotten into him today. Secretly, she had a crush on him for a long time, but she wished he would make a move first so she knew how to act. At that moment, he began to believe this wasn't a dream. It was real. Kyle felt the bed and lifted the blanket, finding the surprise, the Demon King's magical stone lying beside him. At that moment, he was 100% sure this was reality, not fantasy. He went to the mirror to look at himself closely. He looked much younger. He clearly remembered being severely injured after the battle with the Demon King, but now his body was perfectly fine without a scratch. His village was back to normal, and Liza was alive and well. He began to comprehend that he had somehow traveled back in time. The most likely cause in his possession was this magical He knew the Demon King's power was legendary, but a spell that sends you back in time was supposed to be impossible. As he was thinking, he felt hungry. He hadn't eaten since returning. He went down to the kitchen to look for something to eat and found a full meal prepared for him on the table. He realized Liza had made it before she left. He remembered that Liza always came to cook for him and his mother because they never had time to cook for themselves. He silently thanked her. He sat at the table and began to eat. The taste of the food was amazing. For him, after years of eating dried rations on the battlefield, this meal was like a dream. After a while, Siren came down to eat, but when he saw all the plates empty, he looked at Kyle and said, "Are you kidding me? You ate all the food? Even the big pot is wiped clean." Siren started scolding Kyle for finishing all the food. At that moment, Kyle's mind was preoccupied with the thought from earlier. The two of them had been fighting side by side against the Demon King, and Siren sacrificed his life so Kyle could complete the mission. Siren noticed Kyle was distracted and asked what was wrong. Kyle snapped back to attention quickly and said he was fine, but he still didn't know how far back he had traveled. So he asked Siren, What year is it now? Siren looked at him strangely and said, what a weird question. It's normal. Today is May 24th, 2823. Kyle was shocked and asked again to confirm. Siren said, yes, of course, it's your birthday today, and since it's your birthday, I'll forgive you for eating all the food, but I'm still hungry, so I'm going to Liza's to see if there's anything to eat. Kyle let him go and remained sitting in the kitchen, his mind racing with thoughts. If he had really returned to the past, he needed to talk to his mother as soon as possible. He left the house for the store and went down to the library underneath to find his mother there. Seeing her younger than him, he felt indescribable joy, but the image of her horrific death in the future was still before his eyes. His mother was very kind. She was surprised to see him in the library because she knew he never came down there at night. He replied, "The night the sun is up. You've been reading all night and didn't even notice." She apologized for losing track of time, but Kyle hadn't come for that. He told her he had a question about magic theory, and since she was one of the strongest magic scholars in the country, she was the best person to ask. His mother told him to go ahead and ask. He asked, are there any spells in the world that can send someone back in time? His mother looked at him and said, yes, they exist. Kyle was surprised because he had never heard of a time spell before. His mother continued, saying that they know there is something called time magic, but no one has ever been able to use it. The reason is that the spell requires an immense amount of magical energy. No single mage in the entire world can generate it alone. Even if the greatest mage in history tried to use the spell with every ounce of magic they had, they couldn't go back more than 1 second in time. Kyle asked, theoretically, if someone used a magical tool that stores energy, could they go back years? His mother thought for a moment and said, well, if there were a magical tool that stores energy, it might be possible. But storing that amount of energy would take over 1,000 years, so it's practically impossible. Kyle asked, what if someone used a forbidden spell? His mother immediately became tense upon hearing this and asked, where did you hear about that spell? Kyle quickly said he read about it in a book and assured her he would never think of trying it. His mother relaxed a bit, but said she was worried because forbidden spells mean sacrificing one's life force to convert it into magical energy, which is very dangerous. But even if a crazy person tried it, time magic still wouldn't work efficiently. One would need to sacrifice half the souls of the people living on the entire continent to generate that energy, something no human could do. Furthermore, there's nothing in the world that can store energy of that magnitude to begin with. But if such an ancient artifact truly existed, it would probably be written about in that. His mother opened the book and flipped through it until she found the page she was looking for and showed it to him. The page talked about the legendary dragon's heart. It said the ancient kingdom of Sarus thrived for thousands of years due to the energy within this stone. And when the energy ran out, the kingdom fell and was destroyed. She told him she believed a powerful artifact like the dragon's heart could store enough energy to turn back time, but the stone had been missing for over 1,000 years, so it likely fell into the hands of demons long ago. Kyle began to connect the dots. He understood that the stone he took from the demon king was the dragon's heart itself. His mother was happy they were talking like this because she felt he had been avoiding her lately. Kyle apologized, saying he didn't mean to distance himself. She laughed and said she wasn't upset at all. On the contrary, she was happy he came to sit with her for a while. Suddenly, she remembered that Liza said she would come cook for them today, so she asked Kyle if he wanted to go upstairs to eat with them. Kyle quickly said he had already eaten all the food. The moment she said that sentence, all her motherly feelings vanished in a second from shock, then returned calmly. She said, okay, sir, it's fine since it's your birthday today, but you're getting no presents at all. The conversation with his mother was very useful for Kyle, as he gathered important information and understood that the stone was the dragon's heart. The Demon King had likely placed the spell within it to send himself back in time. But Kyle still didn't understand why the Demon King would want to go back in the first place. At that time, Liza returned to Kyle. When he saw her, he began to apologize for his actions that morning. He told her he did it because he had a very bad dream today. Liza asked what the dream was about. Kyle confessed that part of the dream was about her death. Liza then understood why he had hugged her so suddenly. Liza smiled and said she would forgive him because she knew it wasn't his fault. But her smile brought back to Kyle everything he would lose again if he didn't do something. Their village was the closest to the demon territory. Once the invasion began, they would be the first to be hit. The entire village would burn and Liza would die in the chaos. From that moment on, Kyle had sworn to avenge her. But now she was standing before him, alive and laughing. Nothing had happened yet. She looked at him and asked why he was spacing out, but he was lost in his thoughts. If he didn't do anything now, in 3 years he would lose everyone he loved again, something he could never allow. At that moment, Kyle swore to himself that no matter what, he would not let the future repeat itself. This time he would change everything and protect everyone he loved from the terrible fate awaiting them. Kyle knew he had to be ready for the day of the great catastrophe that would happen again in 3 years. The next day, he began his training immediately. He imagined a mental image of the Demon King to fight against. He ran towards it excited, but after a while, blocking a few strikes, he quickly realized his body was very weak compared to his future body, which was logical since at this stage of his life, he was living like a slacker, not training or caring about anything. His combat skills were zero, but fortunately he had retained the magical power he had in the future, so he tried to compensate for his physical weakness with spells to increase speed and strength. Unfortunately, his body was completely uncoordinated. The magic didn't make much difference as long as his body was weak, and he failed immediately. He then understood he had a lot of work to do to make his body capable of handling that power and decided to continue his training no matter what. Meanwhile, Liza and Siren were hiding behind a tree, observing him from a distance. From their perspective, Kyle was standing there shouting and falling over by himself, so they started making fun of him. At that moment, Lily, Siren's mother, appeared and asked what they were doing there. The two said that Kyle had been working very hard on himself these past few days, which was very strange because just a few days ago he didn't care about training at all. Lily didn't understand what had changed him, but if she had to guess, she'd say Kyle was doing it for a girl he liked. These words struck Liza's heart like a knife because Kyle had never confessed anything to her before, so she thought he must love someone else. She grabbed the cooking pot and shook it vigorously until the food he had eaten came back out. When Liza saw what happened, she understood she had overdone it, so she decided to make it up to him and made his favorite meal for lunch. Kyle was very upset about what she did to him but forgave her because she apologized. When they gathered around the food, Kyle said he wanted to ask a strange question. He asked them, what's the best way to get several kingdoms to move and act together? Everyone was surprised by this unrelated question, but his mother thought for a moment and said there were several ways. You could win kings to your side, become a major figure like a priest or a national hero, and if all else failed, you could become a criminal and commit war crimes to attract people's attention. Kyle thanked her for the advice, but he knew he only had 2 years to convince the leaders to act. Among all these options, the only path forward for him was to become a great hero. Kyle returned to his room and read every book in front of him to formulate his plan. He knew his knowledge of the future would be extremely useful in distinguishing between true legends and false ones. During this time, Siren entered the room. Kyle was very focused on. Siren sat next to him and asked if he was serious about becoming a hero, as it's not an ordinary thing. Kyle replied that he knew a true hero is born from defeating the Demon King or saving the world, but it was still early for that, so he had to prepare himself from now. He knew any hero must be very strong, but strength alone wasn't enough. Kyle said it plainly, I need a lot of money. Siren looked at him and said, what kind of hero says that? But Kyle was very serious and said, as a hero I can't take money for my heroics, but I need equipment, travel, and training. It all costs a lot of money, so I need to save a considerable amount from now on. Besides money, Kyle planned to build relationships with influential people to make a name for himself. But what he was saying made Siren feel like he wasn't planning to be a hero, he was planning to become an emperor. Kyle laughed and said that besides money and relationships, he needed a bit of luck because heroes always appear in the right place at the right time. Siren began to think that Kyle might turn to a life of crime and become a warmonger, but Kyle reassured him, saying he didn't intend to cause problems just to appear as a hero who saves the day, but he wouldn't deny using some cunning plans to achieve his goal. Siren thought this didn't sound like a hero at all, but since they were talking, he wanted to ask, why do you want to be a hero in the first place? He felt that being a hero wasn't the ultimate goal for Kyle. It was just a step towards something big. Kyle admitted that he indeed had a reason, but he couldn't tell Siren right now and said, trust me and stay with me. The next morning, Kyle talked to Lily and told her he planned to travel soon and start a new adventure. Lily encouraged him, saying it was a great idea, and it's normal for someone to see the world and learn from it. She asked if he had told his mother. He said he talked to her this morning but hadn't spoken to Liza yet, as he would be away for a while. Lily said, well, take Siren with. He said he was indeed planning to take him and thanked her, but this was the first time Siren had heard of this. After that, Kyle went to Liza and told her he would be leaving in 2 days. Liza asked why he was leaving, but she couldn't stop him from achieving his goal. She asked where he was going. Kyle said his first stop would be the royal capital, and once he finished what he needed there, the real work would begin. Liza said she wanted to ask him a favor, but Kyle preempted her and said he couldn't take her with. Liza was surprised and asked why, especially since Siren was going too. She had become very skilled and wouldn't be a burden. Kyle said he wanted to make sure she would be in a safe place. Liza was about to protest, but suddenly Kyle kissed her and said that the moment he returned she would be the first person he went to. He asked her to trust him. Liza was flustered by what happened and fell silent. All the words she was going to say flew away. In the end she said, "Okay, you big shot, but promise me you won't be reckless there." Kyle promised, and she agreed to wait for him. The next day, Kyle needed to buy some things for the trip, so he asked Liza to go to the market with him. While there, Liza saw an elf standing at one of the stalls. She was very surprised because it was very rare to see an elf in this area, but Kyle was the most surprised of all because this elf wasn't just anyone, it was Werza. Kyle remembered every moment he spent with her in the future and how much she loved him to the point where she told him her true name, a very big deal for elves. He was so shocked to see her that he suddenly said her name out loud. But he shouldn't have done that at all, because in this timeline, Werza didn't know him yet. When she found out that an ordinary human knew her true name, she became very agitated. She asked him who he was and how he knew that name, and was about to attack him. Kyle tried to calm her down and grabbed her arm to avoid causing a scene in the street, but it was no use. He was forced to use her true name again to make her sleep, as knowing an elf's true name allows one to command them. This is why they never reveal their true names to anyone. Werza ended up unconscious in his arms, which was a problem solved, but a bigger problem was standing behind them. Liza saw everything that happened from her perspective. Kyle standing in the middle of the market, seeing a beautiful elf girl, and falling in love with her in seconds. After this incident, Kyle dragged Werza to his house and tried to convince Liza that she had imagined him saying her true name. But Liza wasn't foolish. She knew she heard him say her name, and her true name wasn't supposed to be known by anyone but her family. She demanded he tell her where he got it from. Kyle couldn't tell her that in 4 years they would be lovers and she would trust him enough to tell him her name herself. Even if he told her, she wouldn't believe him, and Werza herself had threatened to kill him if he revealed her name to anyone. "Wait a moment, I promise I'll explain everything later." Werza looked at him in disbelief. "You want me to trust you while you hold my life in your hands?" Kyle offered another solution. "What do you think about making a magical contract that binds us together?" These contracts usually happen between humans and spirits, but under special circumstances, they can be made between two ordinary people to ensure secrecy. The terms of the contract were very clear. Kyle was not allowed to tell her true name to anyone or use it for evil purposes. If he violated the terms at any moment, he would die a terrible death immediately. Werza was surprised that he was willing to bet his life like that, so she decided to trust him for now and give him a chance. But the problem was that the pact needed a full moon to be activated, and the next full moon was in 3 weeks. There was no solution but for her to stay close to him the entire time. But Kyle said he was leaving tomorrow, meaning Werza was forced to go with him. She couldn't let him out of her sight again. The next day, everyone packed their bags ready to move. Kyle said goodbye to his mother, and Liza decided to go with Kyle because she wasn't confident about him traveling alone with Werza after what happened. Kyle told them that instead of going to the royal capital now, he had another plan. They would go to Mount Scored to enter the maze of the Sorcerer King, Siren. Siren objected, saying he would be wasting his time there. It's a legend, and no one has ever found the treasure inside. Kyle reassured them, saying he had a detailed map that would help them reach it. Kyle had drawn the map from his memories of entering the maze in the future, but no one believed the map was real and said he must have been tricked or scammed. Here, Werza decided to help him and told them the paper was made from a magical tree that was 1,000 years old. Of course, she was making this up to support him. Kyle knew the paper was just taken from the books in the library, but the team believed Werza's words more than Kyle's and were reassured the map was real. Even with the map, the maze was huge and would take them years to search, but Kyle had everything planned. He said they would dig a tunnel and started preparing for the tunnel quickly to avoid the deadly traps inside the maze. Even Werza helped them by using the spirit of the earth to reinforce the tunnel and prevent it from collapsing. She seemed very excited, which encouraged Kyle and Siren to dig more and more. After a long day of work, everyone returned to camp, and Liza prepared amazing food for them. The food was delicious. Liza told them to eat as much as they wanted. There was plenty. Werza asked her if she had hunted the bear herself, as she couldn't imagine Liza had experience with weapons. Liza replied simply, "Yes, I didn't use a weapon. I just broke its head with my hands," which was completely normal for her. The girl was surprised again. The next day, they returned to work on the tunnel. While they were resting, Werza came and sat with Kyle. She asked him honestly, "Why are you doing this? Why are you so determined to become a hero in this crazy way?" This was a moment when the others left him without asking, trusting him completely, but she didn't trust him at all and was wondering how an ordinary person could endure all this effort without a reason. Throughout the digging period, Kyle wore rings that made his body 9 times heavier, and despite that, he never complained once. Did this have something to do with him knowing her true name? But before he could answer, they finally reached the place he was aiming for. At that moment, he cut her off and said, "Go call the others quickly." As soon as everyone arrived, Kyle kicked the wall and found a mountain of gold and treasures before them. Siren was overjoyed and said, "I'll never have to work again in my life." They started playing in the gold. Siren asked for permission and disappeared alone because he knew there was another secret treasure inside this maze that he needed to find. He entered a room inside and found the legendary sword that had fought many battles with him in the future. The moment he approached it, the sword's own spirit appeared before him and welcomed him. Selfie began her speech, congratulating the brave hero who managed to pass the maze tests, but suddenly Kyle put his hand on her mouth to shut her up because he didn't want his friends to know about her yet. Selfie was extremely offended and raised her voice. She said, "How dare you be so rude?" But the truth was it had nothing to do with rudeness. Kyle just wanted her to be quiet for a second. When Selfie calmed down a bit, Kyle told her he knew she was a copy of the Sorcerer Queen and that, in truth, he hadn't passed all the traps she mentioned in the maze. He had just found a shortcut and entered quickly. Selfie couldn't believe Kyle managed to cheat her maze so easily. Kyle wanted to explain how he knew how to get there, but he said the fastest way was for him to pass the final test so she could see for herself. The final test was for Kyle to pull the sword so Selfie could read his memories. When she did, she saw a full film of all the calamities that would happen in the future, up to the moment Kyle touched the dragon's heart and traveled through time. Selfie found it hard to believe what she saw was real because she couldn't imagine time magic working on such a scale. But if all this was in Kyle's memories, it must be true. At that moment, his friends noticed Kyle was missing and decided to look for him. But Kyle hadn't told them anything about this yet, so he told Selfie to act naturally with him. He grabbed the sword, and when his friends approached, he shouted excitedly, "I found a very smart sword." Then they all introduced themselves to Selfie. She was very happy while eating Liza's cookies because she hadn't eaten real food for centuries. Liza asked Selfie if she was really the Sorcerer Queen. Selfie said she wasn't the entire Sorcerer Queen. She was just a part of her, a magical being created to evaluate people who reach this treasure vault. If she found them unworthy, she would have blown up the entire place with everything in it. But she found Kyle somewhat interesting, so she approved of him for now. She also told them to take a pouch with them, as it was directly connected to the treasure vault. When Kyle took the treasure he wanted, he and the others went to the royal capital. There, Selfie kept getting distracted to try food from stalls, but Siren didn't want her to waste time because they came here to get new equipment. Kyle knew the perfect place for this equipment and took them to a weapons shop in the middle of the country. The shop was very fancy. When they entered, the receptionist asked if they had a recommendation letter or something because people like them couldn't possibly afford anything from here. Kyle remembered that this shop required a membership fee to serve you, but with the treasure they had now, the fee wasn't a problem. He gave the receptionist a few gold coins from the treasure pouch. The man was about to go crazy from what Kyle gave him and let them enter. When they entered, they met the shop owner, Fezba, who offered to help them choose the equipment they needed. They chose the equipment they wanted. Selfie noticed some swords on the wall and recognized them as the work of Millets. Fezba was surprised she knew with one glance, but she was correct. The swords were indeed crafted by Millets, the great artisan from ancient times, but Selfie said she had met Millets before and his work wasn't the best, and every time she criticized him, he would make a fuss. Fezba was confused by Selfie's words, but before she could say anything else, Kyle pulled her away to prevent anyone from finding out she was the Sorcerer Queen. Anyway, Fezba started showing them around the shop and suggested Kyle buy dragon-scale armor, handmade by oppressed workers and full of resistance magic. Kyle liked that the armor was very practical, so he decided to buy it. Fezba was shocked that he decided so quickly as the armor was very expensive. He asked Siren if he wanted a set of dragon armor like that, but Siren said, "No, I don't want anything so flashy, I'll get another set." Kyle said, "Fine, it's your choice." Since everyone was here, Kyle told them to take anything they felt they would need. And combat equipment for Siren to increase his strength. When they finished all the equipment for those they would need, he said to ask Vespa if he had any magic stones in the storehouse, like something Vespa had hidden behind him. One of the most famous things he had was a magic stone with an explosion spell made on it. I mean something really strong, my friend, in offensive combat. These explosion stones are very nice, but he said he wanted something that would be very strong against crawling monsters. So Vespa brought him a magic stone with a cold spell. These monsters are weak in front of the cold, so this is supposed to be effective with them. But the problem is that making the cold spell on a magic stone is not easy at all, so this thing is very expensive. He said he did not even think to ask about the price. He told Vespa right away that he wanted to buy all the magic stones he had in the storehouse, and also wanted all the healing potions that Vespa had. Vespa was shocked because buying the quantity within the potions would cost a lot of money. He said to him, yes, also, it's true that it wouldn't be practical for him to bring all these coins here, so instead of tiring himself, he put a bag of jewels worth 10 million coins on the table and told him, okay, now the bill is settled. After that, Kale and the rest left the shop, but Siren was a little worried that the song might spread, and the last thing they wanted was for the taxes to come knocking on their door or for someone to come and steal from them. Kyle told him, don't worry about it, we'll leave the capital tomorrow. But the rest were surprised because they didn't know that their stay here would be so short. This was the first time Lisa and Siren had come to the capital, and they wanted to enjoy it more. So Serengri lived his dreams in the big city and read Suza. Lisa told him that she would show her the country, a selfie too. She tried to get away to try food from other kiosks, but Kale caught her and told her, come on, there's something they need to talk about. Alone, when the others left, Kyle took a selfie and went back to the hotel. When they entered, he asked her if she thought that the future could really change. Silva told him that it was a stupid question because the future wasn't determined from the beginning. Everything that's coming, my friend, is blasphemy. We have nothing to do with it. As she sees it, the spell that returned Cal through time might have pulled his spirit from his timeline and put him in an older point in another timeline. Because the dragon heart that he used as a catalyst is still with him, even though the dragon heart of this timeline is still in another place, and Kyle's own presence in this timeline will cause changes. But as things are going, the big invasion will still happen at some point, which means they have to do something about it. When Kyle knew that his actions could change the course of things, he said that he was ready to do anything to save the world. But there is still one thing that is confusing now about the Nin girl in this world because of time travel. One is with him and the other is probably with the demon. But if the matter is like this, he says, why are you surprised? There's only one copy of him and she is the one in front of you now, my friend. Silva has a theory about this matter. She also told him about one of the most dangerous types of forbidden magic, which is the merging of souls. In this world, the maximum magical power of a person is determined from the moment he is born, and no matter how much he trains, he will not be able to change gold. But a long time ago, they discovered that a person's magical power can increase if they merge two souls together. They conducted experiments on infants with artificial souls, but the experiment failed miserably, so the merging of souls was classified as forbidden magic. As for what happened to Kyle Sylvie, he might even be able to use the highest forms of magic, but mastering them was another story. This had never happened before, so Selfie had no idea what side effects might occur for Kyle. Toots told him if he felt anything strange, he must tell her immediately so she could help him. At night, Liza and Werza returned from their tour of the city. Liza was ready to sleep, but Werza said she preferred to stay up a bit because she liked to watch the moon when it was full, which happened once a month. But she was only here because she had to stay near Kyle until the moon was full to perform the binding contract. But she had completely forgotten about it, and the night was almost over. So she needed to find Kyle quickly. Kyle was outside in the forest training with Selfie. Suddenly, Werza came running to him. She reminded him that they needed to perform the contract ritual now. Kyle had completely forgotten about it too, and he was about to go to sleep, so he said it wasn't possible and to postpone it until next month. Werza refused, saying it was impossible. In the end, Kyle agreed. Werza began drawing the small circle for the contract. When she was little, she always saw this contract as a symbol of commitment between lovers at weddings in her village, so she wished to experience the feeling one day, but she never imagined it would happen this way. She finished drawing the circle and told Kyle she was ready to begin, but found him asleep. Werza yelled at him, "Get up, we need to finish this before the night ends." Kyle woke up and they stood together in the middle of the circle. Kyle remembered how he and Werza had performed this ritual in the past when they got married in the second timeline. So after the vow, where he promised not to use her true name for any evil, he leaned in and kissed. Werza was in shock and didn't know how to react at first, but when she processed what was happening, she pushed him away and demanded to know what he was doing. Kyle didn't understand why she was angry. He said, "Isn't this the final step to seal the contract?" But Werza said that kiss only happens if the contract is for marriage, and this wasn't supposed to be a marriage contract. Werza was furious and slapped him again. The next morning, Kyle and the others started to leave the capital. Liza noticed that everyone looked very tired. Kyle said that he and Werza were up until dawn because of a small incident, but Werza didn't want to talk about it. As for Siren, he was up all night trying to find a girl to get involved with. But even though he was rich now, he didn't have that kind of luck. Anyway, the group was now heading to Arkin. Kyle didn't want to explain why, so he told everyone that Selfie had a predictive ability and told them they needed to go there. When they arrived in Arkin, they found themselves arriving just as the princess was visiting the town. Princess Melina was a kind princess whom all the people loved. The others were excited to see her, but Kyle was the only one who knew that in 2 days, Melina would die. In 2 days, Melina would go to Sin's village, and on the way, she would be attacked by a hydra and die. Sin's had recently been attacked by hydras, and Melina was going there to support the people. But that's what got her killed in the end. Kyle saw what happened as a natural result of her poor choices, as going to Sin's village while it was still dangerous, even if out of kindness, was a stupid decision. Selfie told him there might be a possibility that Melina was assassinated, and the incident covered up as a monster attack. Kyle said there were rumors that her brother Prince Carl was behind it, but there was no evidence to prove his involvement. In the end, it was considered an unfortunate accident. Kyle had planned to exploit this unfortunate event to save the princess and become the hero. At that moment, Siren entered and said he had asked around about the princess's plans. Kyle asked him, "Why are you asking about her plans anyway, man?" Siren replied that it was to find the princess at the scheduled meeting point between them. Kyle was shocked and said, "What?" Siren continued, saying he would bravely intervene to protect her from any danger she faced. Kyle was in shock and Siren asked what was wrong. Kyle said the same idea had occurred to him. Siren was surprised and got angry, but Kyle explained that the princess was indeed in danger based on Selfie's future vision, and Selfie confirmed his words. Siren felt this was his chance and said he needed to catch up with the princess. Kyle advised him not to rush. Later they saw the princess's convoy moving from the palace. Kyle and his friends stood watching. Liza asked them if the princess was really in danger. Kyle explained and Selfie interrupted, saying it was her future vision. Werza asked how they could track the convoy without getting too close. Selfie said she would help them with her special ability and suddenly transformed into a hawk. Everyone was stunned, but Selfie explained that her true form was the gem and the sword Kyle carried, and this body was just a symbolic form made of magical energy that could be easily changed. Then she flew into the sky to monitor the princess's convoy from afar without anyone noticing. What Selfie saw, Kyle and his friends saw through the sword. They saw the city guards protecting the princess. Kyle said the guards were well trained, but they couldn't depend on them at this moment. They heard Selfie saying something strange was happening. Kyle quickly asked what monster. Selfie clarified that the drivers of the princess's carriage were attacking the guards. Siren said, "How?" Kyle ran and ordered everyone to go there. They saw that the drivers had killed the guards and one of them threw magical dust. Kyle and his friends approached and Kyle chanted a spell and jumped on the drivers, tying them up with ropes. Siren went to check on the princess and said she was unconscious. Kyle said they probably had accomplices who could arrive at any moment and asked Siren to stay with the princess. Suddenly, a dog appeared and attacked Kyle, but Kyle finished it off with his sword. Then they saw a group of monster dogs standing before them starting to attack them. Werza and Liza began to fight them. One dog approached and swallowed one of the drivers. Liza said their numbers were large. Kyle asked Siren if he knew how to drive the carriage. Siren went but told Kyle he didn't know because the carriage was broken. Suddenly they heard the footsteps of a huge monster approaching. Kyle had anticipated its arrival, and Selfie told him it was close. Kyle told Siren that the princess's safety was their top priority and asked him to stay with her. He asked Liza and Werza to stay with Siren. Werza asked him, "Are you going to fight alone?" Kyle said he wouldn't be reckless and had a chance to defeat it. Werza looked at him and said, "Be careful." Kyle ran towards the monster, while Werza and Liza were struggling with the dogs. Werza summoned a fire spirit and set the dogs on fire. On the other side, we saw Kyle running, looking for the monster. Selfie asked him if he could defeat the hydra. Kyle said the hydra's strength was determined by the number of its heads, and he had once defeated a 3-headed hydra by himself. Suddenly, the hydra appeared before him. Kyle was surprised because this wasn't 3 heads, it had many heads. Selfie told him to run, but Kyle said it was too late. He had to fight. The hydra began attacking Kyle. Kyle said its movements were predictable, but its skin was resistant to sword attacks. Worse than that was its poisonous breath. They saw the hydra poisoning the air around Kyle and the area filled with toxic smoke, but Kyle was fine thanks to his dragon scale armor, which resisted the poison. Kyle took out a magical stone and threw it at the hydra. The stone exploded and froze the hydra. Then he threw a second stone that exploded on the hydra again. The hydra broke free from the second poison breath. Kyle avoided it and attacked the hydra, successfully cutting off one of its heads. They heard Selfie saying he was fighting better than she had imagined. Kyle said, "Shame on you," but the monster's regeneration ability was very fast. At that time, Siren and Liza were still fighting the dogs. Werza said she was worried about Kyle and asked if he could fight the hydra alone. None there. Liza said she was also worried, but they needed to finish off these dogs first. Back to Kyle, who was throwing magical stones at the hydra and freezing it. but the hydra broke the ice quickly. Kyle discovered he only had one magical stone left. The hydra attacked him, but Kyle dodged and cut off another head, but it regenerated immediately. Kyle said its regeneration ability was faster than the three-headed hydra. He took out his last stone with it, used it, and ran quickly towards the hydra, thrusting his sword into its body. The monster was in pain. Kyle pushed deeper and used his magical rings to strike the monster, but the monster threw him away. Kyle flew back, hit a tree, and fell to the ground in pain, but the hydra was standing before. Suddenly they saw a green light emanating from the hydra's body, and then it exploded into pieces. Kyle was very happy he succeeded in defeating it. On the other side, his friends had finished off all the dogs. Werza told Liza she was worried about Kyle and they needed to go to him, but she was surprised when Kyle returned to them. Werza asked him, "Did you really defeat the hydra alone?" Kyle said yes, but they faced some problems. Kyle went to Siren and asked about the princess's condition. Siren said the princess hadn't woken up yet, and it seemed she and her maid had been drugged. Kyle went into the carriage and found Werza and Liza sitting next to the princess. He said they needed to give her an antidote to wake up. He took out the antidote and gave it to the princess. At that moment, Siren told Kyle he had found something on the ground. Kyle took it from him and said the drivers were the ones who lured the monsters to attack the princess. He explained that the princess's death in the previous timeline wasn't an accident, it was an assassination. He went to the city and saw the commander standing with the prince. The commander said to send a team to check on the princess at dusk. Kyle entered the carriage and asked about the princess's condition. Werza shook her head and said there was no news. At that moment, the princess began to wake up. He asked them if she was still alive. Werza told her to rest. The princess thanked them for saving her. Siren spoke up and said, "I'm the one who saved you," but Liza immediately punched him in the stomach and pointed to Kyle, indicating he should be the one talking. Kyle bowed before the princess and said his name was Kyle, and he and his friends saw the princess and her guards being attacked while traveling, so they saved her from the monster. At that moment, Arka, the princess's servant, arrived running towards her, but the princess told her to calm down because these were the ones who saved them. Arka said they couldn't trust any stranger like that, but the princess thanked them for saving her. The princess stood up, but Kyle said the situation outside was bad and advised her not to go out, but the princess insisted. The princess went to one of the tied-up drivers and looked at him. She turned and asked them if they were on the road between Arkin and Since. Kyle replied yes, and the princess asked if all the guards were dead. Kyle said they were all dead when they arrived. Liza said the princess seemed different from before, and Werza supported her. At that moment, Selfie told Kyle that a night squad was coming from Arkin. Kyle informed the princess. The princess here panicked and told them they needed to escape immediately. She also said they wouldn't kill her. They would kill Kyle and his friends with her. Kyle asked, "Shouldn't your kingdom's guards defend you?" The princess replied no and continued, saying the man who wanted to kill her was the commander of the 2nd Battalion. Kyle was surprised and remembered seeing him with the prince in the city. The princess went to Arka and ordered her to burn all the corpses. Arka chanted a spell, and a fireball appeared above her, burning all the corpses around them. She ordered Arka to take charge and told Kyle and his friends they had to leave immediately. Siren threw a bag of dust into the fire, explaining that if they wanted to buy time, summoning monsters would help delay their pursuers. Everyone got into the carriage and left the place. Kyle looked at Molinalva and asked her, unbelieving, "Are you sure Commander Zenitos is behind what happened?" She replied confidently, "I know what I heard yesterday." The prince was arguing with Zenitos, and before she lost consciousness, she heard her brother laughing, happy that the plan had succeeded. He was saying, "All that's left is to put her in the carriage and send her to Since, and then the monsters will eat her, and it's over." She knew he was greedy and trash, but she never thought he would go this far because he was stupid and had no brains or personality. But now he had Zenitos, who was not easy, so he had become truly dangerous. Normally Battalion Keelan of the 5th was responsible for protecting her, but because Keelan was famous, they always forced her to go to parties in the capital, so this time they put Zenitos in charge. When she returned, she thought, "I wish I had been suspicious the first time I saw my brother coming with us because he had no business on this trip." Kyle still couldn't believe Zenitos could be involved in the assassination attempt, but at the same time he couldn't disbelieve Malina. He trusted her, so he was forced to believe that Zenitos was now their enemy. He told her that since the first attempt failed, they would definitely try again, and Zenitos wouldn't let it go. He was planning to frame Kyle and the others for the murder of the royal guards to reach her and make them look like criminals who wanted to kill her. From there, the idea was to leave Molina and save themselves, but time had passed and there was no turning back now. Molina looked at them and said, "I won't forget what you've done, and if we return to the capital safely, I will reward you with a reward worthy of you." There were a few things working in their favor. Battalion Keelan was supposed to reach Karshin the next morning, and when they discovered Molina wasn't there, Keelan would surely move and search for her herself. Kyle asked, what if Battalion Keelan meets Battalion Zenitos? Molyneux's the two battalions' strengths were comparable, which could be more in their favor than Zenitos's. At that point, Liza suggested they hide and wait for things to calm down, but Kyle refused the idea. He said Zenitos might wipe out the entire continent they were heading to silence people. They asked him, could he go that far? Kyle replied, he killed the royal guards to get to Molyneux. Do you think he would care about a few peasants? He saw that the best thing now was to return to Karshine because it had over 10,000 inhabitants, and there was little chance for Zenitos to carry out a massacre there. Also, if they met Battalion Keelan, they would have a chance to survive what was coming. Molyneux agreed to the plan but was worried that if they returned now, they might encounter some of Zenitos's men, so she asked Kyle if he had a plan. He very calmly said he intended to pass through them by force. They stopped the carriage and began to prepare themselves. Thanks to Selfie's surveillance, they could tell that Zenitos wasn't with a battalion, so all they needed to focus on now were the ordinary soldiers. Meanwhile, in the capital, the prince was terrified and angry because the assassination attempt had failed, and Zenitos was trying to reassure him, saying he had sent his men to complete the mission and finish off the princess. But the prince asked why he wasn't going with them. Zenitos explained that Keelan was coming in the morning, and when she found the princess missing, she would question him, and he might not handle the pressure well, so Zenitos needed to be by his side to think of an excuse for him. The prince then said, okay, but since you're involved in this plan, if you make another mistake, I won't forgive you in any. As they were following the carriage containing Molyneux, one of the scouts returned running, screaming that he had seen the carriage turning and coming back in their direction, so it should appear before them soon. The deputy commander then yelled for all soldiers to stay in place and prepare their bows to strike the carriage as soon as it arrived. But what happened was beyond anyone's calculations. The moment the carriage appeared, explosions rained from the sky like rain. This was an aerial bombardment planned carefully, and Selfie had assisted. The soldiers were shocked and the world turned upside down. At that moment, the carriage passed through the middle of the story like an arrow. Werza used wind magic to protect the carriage from the effects of the explosions. But when the deputy commander regained consciousness, he ordered all remaining soldiers to get up and continue the pursuit. Unfortunately, due to all the explosions, one of the carriage wheels flew off and broke, and there was no hope of repairing it in time, so they had no choice but to continue on foot without it. Liza told the princess and those with her to ride the horses, and Kyle decided to use a spell that made him fast enough to run after them on foot. But even after all that, there was no chance they could outrun the remaining soldiers. So Kyle said it plainly, someone had to stay behind and occupy them, and that person was Siren. After a while, the soldiers caught up with Siren and were stunned to find him standing there, waving a white flag and shouting, I don't want to fight. The soldiers stopped in confusion and began approaching him cautiously to see what he was doing. Indeed, he seemed to be intending to surrender, kneeling on the ground begging for mercy and saying, all of this was Kyle's idea, and I have nothing to do with it. He left me and ran away. But if you let me live, I'll give you a bag of gold that will change your lives. But the moment the deputy commander discovered the princess wasn't there, he ordered his men to finish him off so they could continue the pursuit. On the other hand, Werza asked Kyle, were you really planning to leave Siren alone? They will definitely kill you. Kyle explained that she was wrong because Werza didn't know yet that Siren was stronger than Kyle and Liza combined. And indeed, at the moment they were talking, Siren had finished off the deputy commander, cut his throat, and all the acting of surrender was a plan to make them let their guard down. After that, he removed all the training weights he was wearing and prepared for battle against 30 soldiers alone. With lightning speed, he attacked the first 3 and cut off their heads in a second. Then he returned to attack the others. Some soldiers tried to flank him from behind to surprise him, but he was ready, throwing an explosion stone under their feet, and suddenly the ground exploded beneath them. The horses ran away in terror, so they were trapped with no means of escape. After a while of violent combat, only 8 soldiers remained, and Siren began to pant and tire, so he dropped the sword from his hand and said to them, enough is enough. I've finished my job. Kyle and the others must be close to Karshine by now, so we don't need to continue fighting. He also told them that surely they now understood they couldn't win against him, so if they walked away, he wouldn't do anything to them. The soldiers stopped to think for a moment, and frankly they weren't being paid enough for this, so they picked up their wounded comrades and began to retreat slowly, limping away to look for medical aid. But Siren wasn't planning to leave any loose ends, and that meant that even if he said he would let them escape, he threw another explosion stone at them and charged to finish off the rest. Perhaps this was crueler than necessary. Cruel, this is sadistic. But Kyle had said it before, Siren was a merciless warrior. At the same time, in Arkin, Zenitos began to feel something was wrong because he hadn't heard any news from his soldiers for a long time, so he decided to go out himself and see what was happening. He left some soldiers to guard the prince, mounted his horse, and headed into the forest. Selfie saw him coming towards the group and quickly informed Kyle that a very powerful knight was coming at them. But after seconds, Zenitos saw Selfie and struck her with a single blow from a distance, knocking her out of the sky. Then Kyle understood immediately that the only person who could pinpoint her location and hit her with such accuracy was Zenitos. At that moment, he told Maldonado hide in the forest temporarily and asked Werza and Siren to take Maldonado and run if they felt something was wrong. But Maldonado was afraid and asked him, "Are you sure you can defeat him alone? He's the strongest knight in the kingdom." Kyle said he would have preferred to avoid this confrontation entirely, but now there was no other choice. After a while, Zenitos was passing through the middle of the forest, and Kyle was standing alone in the middle of the road waiting for him. He asked, "Are you the one helping Maldonado?" Kyle said, "Yes, it's me. But tell me, why did you come alone? You could have brought the other soldiers." Zenitos replied that he didn't want any of them to die without being directly involved in what was happening. Kyle, despite always being prepared for battle, said to him calmly, "I don't want to kill you. If you surrender, I can have the princess officially pardon you. But before all that, why did you do this? I'm sure you're not the type who cares about money or position." But Zenitos said, "There's no use in talking because you're going to die now anyway." At that moment, Kyle understood there was no escape and fighting became inevitable. The two drew their swords and each cast spells of strength and speed on themselves. Then they charged at each other with all they had. Zenitos used his famous illusion magic and tried to distract Kyle, but Kyle avoided it and countered with a counterattack that forced Zenitos to step back. Zenitos was shocked because this was the first time someone had seen through his illusion on the first try. But Kyle wasn't lucky. He knew everything about this magic because in the past, Zenitos was the one who taught him everything about the art of the sword and his magic. After Kyle managed to avoid the first deadly attack from Zenitos, he began to realize that his current physical strength wouldn't be enough against the monster standing before him. He was thrust back quickly, and Zenitos began firing energy orb after, causing Kyle to lose his balance. Zenitos decided to finish him off, but Kyle, with unnatural agility, stepped on his own sword and used the move to dodge the attack. Zenitos was very angry at this behavior and said it was disrespectful to the sword, but Kyle replied calmly, "I learned that move from my teacher." Then he threw a magical explosion stone at him, but Zenitos, with his intelligence and immense speed, kicked the stone with his leg and sent it back to Hithiel, who was surprised and got hit instead of attacking. In the blink of an eye, Zenitos attacked him again before he could gather himself. But during the clash, Zenitos' sword began to crack. Then he understood that Kyle wielded a much stronger weapon and began to retreat a step back. Kyle asked him to surrender again, saying, "Man, I don't want to kill you." But he refused and said, "The best way I surrender is by dying," and began preparing a final decisive attack, the aura around him terrifying. Kyle stood ready for the final battle. Zenitos asked him his name before they exchanged blows. Kyle introduced himself and said, "Remember the name well," and they launched at each other at the same moment. Zenitos managed to block Kyle's first strike and left him exposed, striking him with all his strength, but his sword shattered the moment it touched the dragon's heart inside him, the surprise that changed the course of the battle. Zenitos realized then that he was in a weak position, and Kyle gathered all his strength and struck a fatal blow to his chest. Zenitos fell to his knees, blood flowing from him. He looked at Kyle and asked, "You let me block your strike on purpose to get me into this position?" Kyle said, "No, you were truly stronger than me in every way, but I was sure you would attack without thinking and I was prepared." Zenitos smiled a sad smile and said, "You are strange." Then he said in a low voice, "I'm sorry," in some words they couldn't hear, and he fell silent forever. Kyle was sad and apologized to him while crying, saying there were things he had to protect no matter what, even if it meant killing his dearest friends. We returned to the city. Prince Karen was pacing around his room like a madman, waiting for Zenitos to return, not understanding what was taking so long. He heard a sound coming from afar and thought it was Zenitos, but unfortunately it was Killon, the commander of the 5th Battalion, who entered with an order, screaming for the guards to enter and arrest him. Karen tried to dismiss them, but Battalion Killon entered the room, and he fell completely silent. Melina entered the room and at that moment ordered Killon to arrest this trash and interrogate him, using force if necessary. Then she left the room and the prince's screams turned to screams of being beaten outside the room. Melina thanked Kyle and his team for helping her, getting her out of this mess. She took them with her to the royal palace to thank them formally and reward them. Suddenly the king entered. The king thanked them for saving his daughter and began to wonder to himself why Zenitos would join a plan to kill Melina. He asked Kyle and the team not to tell this secret to anyone. Kyle promised they wouldn't do anything to harm the country. After that, a fake official story spread throughout the kingdom, saying that Melina and Karen had a disagreement, and during a trip the place was struck by a disaster, and they were attacked by dangerous monsters. It said the knights, led by Zenitos, tried to protect the prince, but they died. They said Karen was severely injured and was still being treated in a secret place. The only true part of the story was that Kyle saved the princess. On the day he was to receive the reward with his team, they were awarded the Medal of Honor for saving the princess, and all the people received him as if he had become the new hero of the king. Although Melina was now understanding, the danger wasn't over because the one behind the entire attack wasn't Karen or Zenitos. It was her father, the king himself. The man had reached the point of envying his daughter because she was more capable than him in everything, and he feared that when she became queen, she would restore the kingdom to its former glory, something he couldn't achieve. He was afraid she would outshine him in history, and he would be forgotten, so he began thinking about how to get rid of her so he would remain the only hero in the history books. The man at one moment, while sitting in his room thinking about how to kill her, was suddenly entered by Kyle, disguised as a professional assassin. The king was shocked and didn't know how to react, but Kyle grabbed him from behind and covered his mouth so he couldn't scream. He began reproaching him for his past decision when he refused to help the dwarves during the Great Invasion, which allowed the demons to enter half the continent easily. Kyle said he wouldn't hold his stupidity against him, but what he really understood was that Zenitos wouldn't have attacked Melina without a direct order from the king himself. And suddenly Kyle shoved him toward the balcony and said everything was clear. Zenitos, the loyal man, would never attack Melina without an explicit order from him. The king was sweating and trembling, but despite that, he said, "And what's it to you?" Kyle began shoving him while saying, "Even if Melina has evil plans, she is kinder than all of you as a royal family." At that moment, the king removed the disguise from Kyle's face, but it was too late, and Kyle shoved him, and the king fell from the balcony and died. The guards ran to the sound of the crash and found the body. They said he was probably drunk and fell, but to maintain his image before the people, they spread a rumor that he died of a heart attack. The news spread quickly and reached Kyle's team. They were happy that Melina would now take power, but what caught their attention was that she asked to meet Kyle alone before the coronation. When Kyle entered the meeting, Melina shocked him with startling news. She told him she was engaged to Prince Mir of the Gargantuan Empire. Kyle was shocked and said, "How?" She explained that it was a deal between the two empires, and they promised them land in exchange for her engagement. But the people who made the agreement were negligent and didn't even write a formal contract. On top of that, the region of Karn wasn't even part of the agreement, so it would remain under the jurisdiction of the Zergos Empire, which was her empire. Melina wanted to formally reject the engagement now, but before doing so, she needed to obtain the approval of the ruler of Karn himself. This task had become Kyle's burden. He spent the whole night unable to sleep thinking about it. Selena came to him and asked why he wasn't sleeping. He said he was worried about the Gargantuan Empire's reaction. She replied, telling him to focus on Karn first. It seemed they had problems. Their ruler hadn't even attended the king's funeral, which meant something wrong was happening there. She also said she suspected Melina was using her intelligence as usual and planning for him to solve the problem without directly asking him. Kyle felt relieved after her words and said to himself, "Okay, it's a chance to increase my reputation as a hero and also to get away from her headaches for a bit." But before traveling, he needed to see her again. There, she asked him to join the royal guard and become her personal knight. He was surprised by this offer and told her he had other missions he needed to accomplish, but if she needed him, he would be the first to come to her aid. After all that, Kyle took his team and went to Old Man Fezba's weapon shop. Fezba was happy to see Kyle again, congratulated him on the medal, and as soon as he started talking, Siren cut him off and said, "Is my sword ready?" Fezba, who never rode, brought out the sword and said, "See for yourself." At that moment, Kyle asked him, "By the way, do you know anything about Karn? We're going there on our next trip." As soon as Fezba heard the name, his expression changed, and he said, "Karn is a very difficult place. The situation there isn't easy at all." He began to tell him that the entire city was controlled by the Blacksmiths Guild, causing many problems and complicating life for everyone working there, even for small shops like his. Trade there had become stifling because of them, and anyone wanting to open a business had to go through them. But Fezba continued, saying the situation had begun to improve slightly since Karn became a subordinate of the Zergos Empire. There was better control and system, which opened new opportunities for people to work and earn. Kyle thanked him for the talk and information, and after they finished speaking, Kyle and Siren left the shop and returned to the rest of the team. The girls were waiting for them, and immediately everyone moved together and began their new journey towards the city of Karn, which was clearly not going to be an easy. The group finally reached the city of Karn, a city truly deserving of its title as the mining city, as it was almost built inside the mountain itself. But Selfie came out and told them the opposite was true. The mountain was built around the city, not the city built inside it. It had existed since ancient times when the city was first established, and its land was all flat and level, with no mountains. They used magic and lifted the ground up so they could reach the minerals. That's why the mountain looks like this now. Suddenly, the group noticed something big flying over their heads. When they looked up, they found the dragon riders of the Jargon Empire. Sylvie was amazed that they were able to tame these dragons. But Kale was more worried than the reason for their presence here in the first place, and all he wished was that the matter had nothing to do with them. Then they entered the city, and after they presented their identity papers, Kale asked to meet the ambassador of Zergus, who was in Karn. While the guard was reviewing the data, the rest sat watching the city. But Ozo was clearly worried because the relationship of the elves is not the best with the dwarves, and suddenly the ambassador of Zergus appeared to welcome them, and when she introduced herself and said that her name is Mirinda, Kale was shocked and kept quiet because he knew her from the other timeline and had no idea that she was working as an ambassador at this time. So she noticed that Kale was focusing on her more than necessary, so she interrupted him, and at that moment he told her that they came with a message from Queen Melina. Mirinda took them in with him, and when she returned to look at the official papers, she confirmed that they were indeed envoys from the queen, but she was surprised by their appearance and said that they were the strangest delegation she had ever seen in her life. But still, with the chaos that the kingdom was living in now, what kind of delegation could be accepted, especially with Melina in power? By the way, Mirinda wanted to thank Kale and the others herself because they saved Melina's life a short time ago, and Melina is one of Mirinda's dearest friends, and she would be devastated if anything happened to her after that. She told them that she knew that they came to meet Governor Pax of the Gurgan Empire, but unfortunately the man has been sick for weeks and confined to bed. Even she herself was unable to meet. Every time they tried to tell her that he does not receive anyone in his condition, but since he is a ruler, he is forced to meet any envoy from his queen against his will. So with the presence of Kale and the others here, it will be forced to meet them. Miranda went out with them, and Kyle noticed that she brought a large number of guards. And this is suspicious, especially since this visit is supposed to be routine and just a negotiation. Since Sir has no role in this meeting, he told Kyle that he will go and do some things on his own, saying that he has no objection but asked him not to delay. He arrived at the embassy, and suddenly the ambassador appeared next to him. From the first glance, the animosity between him and Miranda was clear, but because their word could ignite a civil war at any moment, they had to pretend that they were friendly with each other. The ambassador was not alone. He was with the second magician in the military force. The emperor's level showed him all of them, and he was known as Alizard, and as soon as he saw Kyle standing in front of him, they didn't know what his purpose was in meeting him. The governor explained to him that he was here as an official ambassador from the kingdom of Melina. Alizard, as soon as he heard that, connected things together and understood that Kyle was the hero who saved Melina. Alizard had been interested in meeting him for a long time because he was his mother's colleague, and they used to spend a long time together researching magic. Alizard extended his hand to greet him. Kyle was hesitant at first, but in the end the man seemed friendly, so he greeted him and said, "I am honored to meet you." However, Alizard's features showed that his intentions were not good. In the end, the two groups walked together to meet the governor. Miranda was very irritated because this was the same talk from the guards for 2 months, and she was tired of begging to see the ruler. The guard tried to appease her, understanding her anger was logical, but he was just doing his job, so he promised to convey to the ruler that she had come. Miranda then threatened him, saying that if Pax didn't intend to fulfill his responsibilities, she would be forced to appoint a new ruler in his place, but she would give him 2 days, no more, to get himself together. At that time, Siren had left the group and was walking around the city looking for a good sword to buy for himself, but unfortunately, all the swords he saw looked very ordinary, and there was nothing distinctive. Suddenly, he heard a scream coming from afar. He ran quickly towards the sound and found a somewhat cute-looking girl being harassed by some men. Without thinking for a second, Siren intervened, punching one of them in the face to get him away from the girl. Then he introduced himself to her, but here he said there was a big misunderstanding, and this girl was actually a boy. Siren fell to the ground, shocked, unable to believe he made such a silly mistake. And since it was a boy, Siren lost all interest in the situation and didn't want to intervene anymore. He started walking away. The boy named Joe was shocked and asked, "Aren't you going to save me because I'm a boy?" Siren replied simply, "Yes, exactly." But as he walked 2 steps suddenly and asked him, "Do you have a sister who looks like you and is beautiful too?" Joe said he had an older sister. Immediately, Siren became interested in the situation again and decided to help. The men told him to back off and mind his own business, but he had in mind a potential date with Joe's sister, so he attacked them, beat them up, and literally disabled them. Joe was very impressed and thanked him for his help, introducing himself as a maker of magical tools. Siren was surprised that a young boy like Joe could make magical tools, but he let that point go and asked him why those men were attacking him. Joe said hesitantly that they were collecting debt. At first, Siren thought Joe was drowning in debt because of his family, but no, the truth was that Joe brought this trouble upon himself. Simply put, a client commissioned him to make a special magical tool, and he took the money up front, but he didn't clarify how long it would take. When the client found out that the piece would take 10 full years to complete, he became very angry. Siren felt that Joe deserved to be beaten a little for this story, but in the end he didn't care. What mattered to him was meeting Joe's sister. But here, Joe dropped the bombshell. He told him that his older sister was already married and wouldn't go out with him for sure. Siren fell to his knees again from shock and said, "Why didn't you tell me from the beginning?" Joe replied, "I was afraid if I told the truth, you would have left the situation and not helped me." Siren couldn't deny that he might have done that, but he couldn't help feeling angry for being fooled, so he stood up and gave him a slap on the head. At that time, Miranda was sitting with the great blacksmith, Gaz, trying to convince him to agree to become the new ruler of the city, but he refused immediately without even thinking. Gaz's only passion in life was blacksmithing and sword making, and he said if he took the position of ruler, he wouldn't have time to make any swords, so he couldn't possibly accept the position. Miranda tried to insist, saying the city had many problems that needed fixing, but Gaz replied simply, "These are things I can't help with." While Kyle and the others were waiting for Miranda to finish her talk with Gaz, Siren entered with Kyle was surprised to see Siren here, but the bigger surprise was that Gaz turned out to be Joe's father. Kyle thought that if luck was on their side, they might get Gaz to make a decent sword for Siren, but it would probably be delayed since he was busy with Miranda. Joe offered them tea and apologized for the mess in the house, saying that since his sister got married, he couldn't maintain the house's cleanliness alone. While they were waiting for the tea, Kyle glimpsed some blueprints and drawings on the table, and when he looked at them closely, he was utterly shocked by what he saw. Joe returned with the tea and explained that it was the project he was working on, a mechanical magical tool. But Kyle recognized it immediately because in the previous timeline, this tool was an invaluable gem on the battlefield, and he didn't know that Joe was the one who made it himself. Kyle called Selfie to look at the blueprint, and Selfie was very impressed with the design because it was nearly perfect. Kyle asked Selfie if she thought the design could succeed, and she said the chances of success were very high. Kyle became very excited. If they could mass-produce these mechanical golems, they would have a huge advantage in the war against the demons. Kyle told Joe to finish building it quickly, but Joe said something of this size and complexity would take at least 10 years. Kyle became annoyed and said, "No boss, I need it within 1 year, and I'll spend any money required to make it happen. Don't worry about the costs." Joe was overjoyed by the amount of financial support. After closing this deal with Joe, they returned to Gaz's office to see if Miranda had reached an agreement with him or not, but it was clear Gaz hadn't changed his mind. Miranda said she would leave now but would return tomorrow to try again with him, and he replied that there was nothing in the world that could make him accept the position. After Miranda left, Kyle entered to see Gaz and said he had a request. Gaz thought he would ask for a sword and quickly said he wasn't taking orders now, but Joe entered and praised Kyle, so Gaz agreed to listen to his request. Kyle said he wanted a sword for Siren because his current sword wasn't sufficient. Gaz was very surprised by this because he saw that Siren's sword was made by a deuce and not many people could say that sword was unsuitable. Siren said he desired a sword of the same quality as Kyle's. As soon as Gaz saw Kyle's sword, he was shocked and fell completely silent because even with all the ancient swords he had seen, only one could compare to it, and yet Kyle's sword was even better. He said honestly that he currently couldn't reach the level of craftsmanship required to make a sword like that. Siren was disappointed not to find a sword, but Gaz hinted that he had seen something similar to Kyle's sword before, so they decided to return tomorrow to talk to him about it. Near the meeting room, Kyle suddenly felt a strange feeling all over his body. He trembled, and when he opened the door, he found Lazard's severed head thrown on a plate and a demon standing over him. Here, we know that demons are the race that dominates the rest of the continent. Their number is less than humans, but each one of them is much stronger. The problem is that they haven't launched any attacks for 3 centuries, and this made humans lazy and didn't pay attention to them, to the point that they became very rare. But Kyle knows them well, and the presence of the horn on the head of this demon means that she is one of the most dangerous enemies of humans. The demon quickly attacked Kyle, but he managed to block her blow and responded with a blow of his own. Kyle was aware that he wasn't wearing his armor and didn't have Sylph with him, and he wasn't able to use a magician. Fazliel told himself that he was reckless and said that he wouldn't have made such a mistake before the Great Invasion. Suddenly the guards arrived to see what was wrong, but the demon ran away. From the window, one of the wounded guards quickly ordered that they summon the remaining soldiers, and then they found half of the soldiers and officials of the Imperial Embassy killed without anyone seeing or hearing anything. The next day, all the young men were gathered together at that time. Lisa entered and told them that the food was ready. Sylvie asked about Kyle Forza. She told her that he was having lunch with one of the Imperials and that they did not like official meetings, so they did not go with him. Joe apologized and that his father had not been there since morning. Siren asked him that she had not heard anything about him. He was speaking as if he knew something about a sword similar to Kyle's. Joe replied that he might mean Rand's Sacred Summer. The hero Randolph used it at the time and defeated the Demon King, and the summer became known as Rand's Sacred Summer in his honor. He continued and said that he was most likely in the city now. Siren was very impressed, but Joe explained to him that if he was really in Karn, then it would be. Then he looked out the window and asked Joe if he had a problem with someone. He told him that there was a problem with a lot of people. At that time, he told him that the house was surrounded by men stronger than those they saw yesterday. He grabbed a sword and said to his friends, "I will deal with most of them, but maybe a few of them will get in." Lisa told them to trust him because he senses danger in such things. He told her to hide Joe, but Joe refused and wanted to help. Sylvie decided to take him and hide him herself. The men around the house started trying to get in. Sir broke the door and grabbed one of them and hit him. He said to the rest, "Run if you don't want to die." A few of them entered carrying daggers filled with poison. Rita warned her friend that this poison was dangerous as a mere scratch could paralyze the whole body, so they had to be careful. Lisa entered carefully and killed one of them until he fell to the ground, even though she wanted to interrogate him before he lost consciousness. Another one tried to attack Lisa, but Graz created a water barrier that protected her from the blow and the poison. Then she choked him until he lost consciousness. Lisa thanked her and they tied the two of them up. Then Sir arrived with the rest tied. He started interrogating one of them and told him, "If you want to live, talk, because the two of them have experience in torture." He explained to him that Lisa can turn anything in the house into a torture tool and humiliate you. When he knew that their plan was to kidnap Joe, he was surprised and told them, "You look really wrong about just kidnapping two people." Joe stood and told them to think a little. He said that he heard rumors that the disappearances had increased in Karen, and they still didn't know who was behind them. So they asked him, "What does the kidnapped people attract?" The man said, "We were taking them to an empty house outside the city." Before he could finish, suddenly the devil appeared and threw a fireball at the house and set it on fire. The man was silent before he revealed the rest. Lisa tried to run after him, but Sir stopped her. He said, "This time, I've never met anyone so dangerous. I haven't had this feeling since I saw Alm with all her strength." Then they all gathered in one room and said that if the demons were involved, then they devised a scenario in which they would blow up the entire city. He said, "No, the time is not right to attack the demons. We must first confirm Governor Pax's connection to the kidnappings." Miranda then apologized. "Dad, I should have told you sooner. We have indeed confirmed that kidnappings are happening, but we do not know who is behind them because they are well covered." Suddenly, someone ran in and told them that the governor's palace was on fire, and everyone was shocked. They quickly went to see what was wrong. He said, "You were late." The entire palace was burned in an unnatural way. Siren came back from the wreckage and said, "I searched the palace, but I didn't find anything." Miranda also said, "I did not find anything." Even the governor's body was not there, even though he was sick and should be sleeping inside. Lisa asked, "Is this the work of the demons?" Ratha replied, "If the demons, they used arson. They set fire to the embassy. If they weren't the ones who did this, then the missing governor is our main target. If he is the mastermind behind the sisters' excerpts, it would be normal for him to set fire to the palace to destroy the evidence, and we must find him quickly." Suddenly, Joe entered very upset at the sight of the fire and said to them, "I came as soon as I heard about the fire. I was worried because my father, the governor, had summoned him to Luxor. I think it might be because Jazz is a candidate for the governor's position. If this is true, then there is a high probability that Pax is the one behind the kidnappings." Suddenly, Miranda fell to the ground crying, "This is my fault. I'm the one who nominated him for the governor's position. I'm the reason I brought an important person into this matter. If anything happens to him, I will never forgive myself." Lisa tried to calm her down and said, "We're still not sure that things have reached this point." Kyle was standing silently thinking, why is she so broken down? Then he remembered the day she asked him, "Do you think I'm Asia? I wasn't like this before. I used to love before, by the way. But my lover died because of me, and from that day on she decided to bury her feelings and she remained like this after that." Joe was talking to them and told them, You didn't know that they loved each other. My father was difficult to deal with at first, but when you got close to him, you discover that he is good, but recently he was strained. I feel that he was distancing himself from her, and sometimes she would even come and eat me herself, as if she was trying to win this, and given her personality, I think that she sees that this is her last chance. We go to Kyle while he is thinking if her lover in her past life was Jas, then this is definitely the moment he will die. He has to think more. Surely there was something else worth remembering. And suddenly he remembered in his mind the day when Miranda was drunk and she said to him, "If only you had found the secret passage sooner." He said he put on his armor and said to his friends, "I am going to the governor's palace. I found something, they will see it." He replied, "I am coming with you." And the rest of them all said that they wanted to go with him. The scene suddenly changes, and we see a new place for the first time. A new character standing in front of a corpse on the other side. Our friends arrived above. He said to him, "Let's start working." She asked him, why her in particular? He explained to her that he needed her to help him carry all this debris so they could search for the entrance. Raza stood there and said to him, "What did you say again?" "You want me to use my magic and turn this whole giant pile upside down so we can search for a passageway that might not even exist." He said calmly, "This is exactly what I want you to do. And by the way, if you're afraid of getting tired from lack of energy, I'm in charge of this matter and have prepared a large dose of man for you." Raza was holding herself back from hitting him, so she said to him, "Genius, have you ever tried this potion of magic before?" He replied, "Yes, I know everything about it. It really renews energy, but its taste is disgusting than strong tar." He understood, of course, why Raza didn't want to keep drinking it every now and then. But despite that, he kept trying to trick her because it was the only solution that could get them to Jazos before it was too late. Lisa and Siren also got involved and told her to reconsider. It was difficult for her to refuse. They were talking to her with such seriousness, so she was forced to sacrifice and took the box of potions and went out, upset, searching in the rubble. As soon as Kyle left, he looked at Siren and asked him, "Are you sure that the demon who attacked Joe's house was a man?" Siren told him that he saw him and that he was definitely a man, and since the one before him, Kyle at the embassy, was a female demon, then there were at least 2 demons in Carnal. He entered and Rasa was still drinking these disgusting potions, and her magic was moving rocks, and she felt that she would return, but her efforts were not in vain. Her djinn had something to do with her. And when they examined her, they discovered that it was the secret door. They all went down, and he warned them to be aware that there might be demons here. He also said that although this was the first once he saw a demon and felt that he was unnaturally strong. Reze wondered how much he knew about demons. He replied that they were dangerous enough to deserve all this caution. He also said that Anza and Lisa, in their state after consuming a lot of mana, shouldn't have come with. But as soon as he told him that, the 2 of them flew at him and told him that it was impossible for them to come back, especially the one who drank the mud by force. He was determined to finish it to the end. He knew that there was no hope of convincing them to come back. Suddenly, he noticed something at the end of the corridor. They all ran to see what was in it. Sylvie explained that this was a forbidden ritual. Serene asked her what it meant. Sylvie explained that it was a ritual that converts life energy into magical energy. They looked closely at the corpse and found that the body was dry as if it were stone. It turned out that it was Pax's chief butler. And the corpses next to her are the people who were kidnapped. Make sure that Pax is red, but the question is, why does he need so many people to sacrifice the innocent souls for her? Sylvie focused on the magic circle on the ground, and noticed that it was made in a way that would draw a little bit of energy from the victims until they died, but this weak catalyst would clearly reach its limit and explode. They asked her, "Are you sure?" She replied that there was no mistake in her conclusion, and with the amount of stored magical energy, the explosion could wipe half the city off the map before she could finish. She felt that someone was coming, so everyone quickly hid. Moments later, 2 demons entered. Janis was happy that the weather was over. He removed the inhibitor from the servant. The whole time, this demon didn't say a word, so Janis said to her, "Is he going to kill you? If you talk to me a little bit, I didn't do anything wrong." "Yes, we agreed with the human, but everything is going well." Raj asked him, and the attack on the embassy was part of the plan too? He told her no, it was a request from the human conspirator with them, so it's not his fault. Later she asked, "So what about the bombing that happened in the random house?" He replied, "It's not my fault. It was a distraction so the kidnapping would appear normal." He also said that he was still maintaining the rule of reducing losses, and in the end all of this was so that they could get what their king wanted. Raj said that she understood but was upset that they had to work with such insignificant humans. After that they went out. Self was surprised and said that it was the first time she heard that the Demon King cared about reducing losses among humans, something that didn't make sense a bit. He said that the important thing was that they had gathered important information. Now that was left, they had to find Pax and Jazos. They went deeper into the cave, and when they arrived at a room filled with strangely clean furniture, they found Jazos tied up next to a chair. Suddenly he heard the voice of an old man saying, "Who are you and how did you get in here?" It turned out that this man was Governor Pax. As soon as he saw Kale and the others, he started screaming that he would protect Karen from the Empire and the kingdom no matter what happened. The group did not understand how a man like that could say he was protecting while he was kidnapping Karen's people and draining their life force. Pax refused to explain why he was doing this, but suddenly, a spy spoke and said that the magic under Karen will soon be finished, and as soon as it ends the city will collapse. Pax wanted to prevent this from happening and Jazos intended to help him at first, but as soon as Pax started talking about the sacrifices, the matter turned into a disaster. Sylph looked at Pax and from the first glance she understood that he was suffering from an incurable disease and it would be a miracle if he lived to see the next month. We didn't laugh at anyone. This was a deal. Kale asked him, "What deal do you mean?" Jins told him that he wasn't obligated to explain, but since he loves to fool around, he decided to say that the city was originally built when the dwarves gathered in the mountain with magic, so they could extract other ores in the same way. And this is exactly what the forbidden ritual was made for. But the demons wouldn't agree to do something like this without something in return, and what they wanted was the holy sword, the weapon that killed the previous demon king. And the current king wants himself, saying he understands that he can extract more information from him if he plays it right, so he pretends not to know that the sacred sword is in Karn. And all of this is to feed Jin's ego and make him complete the story. Jin started to say that at first he was sent away on a normal reconnaissance mission, but when he knew that the sacred sword was in Karn and heard the ruler's concern, he decided to offer him a deal, and Pax, because he was desperate, agreed without thinking, saying he played it right and sat bragging about him and saying to him, "You are a genius, how are you like this?" He suddenly believed himself and kept babbling, but before he could speak, Ak told him to be quiet, saying he understood that no more information would come out. So he took out his sword and said, "We will end this matter." Jin realized that he had spoken a lot, but he said it doesn't matter. The only solution is to wipe them off the face of the earth. Raja tried to stop him and told him that the king had forbidden the killing of many people, but he replied, "These people have already realized that we are here, and it is not my fault, so we must wipe them out so that the mission remains secret." As soon as Pax hearing this, he got nervous and said, "So what about the agreement between us? I promised you that I would give you the holy sword if you return the Karn mines with magic." Then he shouted at him, "You'd be a real idiot if you believe that demons would be gone after the humans." He laughed and told him that he really intended to use the earth-transforming magic to return the mines, but with the catalyst that couldn't handle the energy, he would have set the whole city on fire. Pax was shocked and broken by the words, but Siren got tired of his nonsense and fell and told the spy to take care of him. Janice then told him that Org would get rid of Lisa and Araza, and he would get rid of Kyle and Siren. But Siren suddenly told him that he had something important to do and he left Kyle alone. Raj told Araza and Lisa, "If you return now, I'll let you go." It was said that the losses were only Urza and Lisa could not leave the battle, so they attacked her, but she was easy on them. Sylvie asked, "Sir, aren't you going to help them?" He replied, "She's not really fighting, so she's not going to kill them. Consider it free training for them." After that, Silva showed Pax a magic crystal stone, which she had taken from Pax, and she confirmed that it was made to hide the presence of anything. She remembered that Pax was looking in a certain direction when Siren brought the Holy Summer. Siren broke the crystal, and at that moment he felt something hidden and went to look for it. At the time that Siren was searching, he said that he was struggling in front of Janice, and this was because the amount of energy he had was not normal, in addition to the fact that he was casting a spell without uttering a word. He said that he was catching up, but he had no choice but to wait a little while until Siren finished. Siren reached the illusion and noticed the small box. He hit it with his sword and the sword broke, but the box opened and revealed the holy sword, and with that the sword was in his hand and he was able to enter the battle. As soon as Jins heard that the holy sword met 8, it was enough for Kyle to get close and attack Jins before Lisa and Raza noticed. They didn't miss the opportunity, and Raza threw a huge fireball, and Raja was blocking it. At that moment, Lisa approached and hit her. She tried to dodge the blow, but a part of her touched her, and this raised their morale and made them feel that they had hope. Raja got angry and said, "You will regret what you did." But suddenly she heard Jin scream, and when she looked, she found Kyle standing over him, lying on the ground. As soon as Jin's was scattered, she said, "Seize the opportunity and get close to him and cut off one of his horns," which might not be dangerous to his life, but it is a disaster for the demons because these horns, for them, are a symbol of position and power, and any demon whose horn is broken is subjected to ridicule and insults. At that moment, Siren returned to the group with the sacred sword, and Rags demanded he hand it over. But why would Siren do that? The sword was a masterpiece. The situation began to heat up further, so Kyle intervened and made a proposal. He said they didn't want to prolong the fight because they had injured people to care for, and he suggested a truce. In 3 days they would have a second battle. If Kyle's side won, he would hand over the sacred sword and return Gen's horn. But in return, the demons had to reveal their plans regarding the infiltration. Gens and Rags were not happy with Kyle's terms, but still, there was no guarantee they would win if they continued fighting. And since Gens wanted his horn back at any cost, he blew a hole in the wall and left with Rags, telling Kyle they would return in 3 days for the battle. The fight was finally over. Everyone carried Gaze out of the cave and returned to the city, to Joe and Miranda. The moment Miranda saw Gaze, she ran to him, crying with joy because if he had died she would have blamed herself forever. After they entered the house, they laid Pax on the bed. Despite all he had done, Gaz didn't consider him a bad person. He just wanted to secure Karn's future and was willing to do anything for it. Gaz had known for about a month that Pax was kidnapping people and tried to convince him to stop, but Pax refused to listen. Worse, he threatened to kill Miranda and Joe if he intervened, so Gaz was forced to drop the matter and do nothing. As for the sacred sword, Gaz thought of requesting it after Siren found it, but Kyle cut him off and said Siren would keep it. Gaz was shocked, saying the sword was a national treasure and couldn't just be taken like that. Kyle admitted he had a point but said, "Look, I saved your life and Siren protected Joe. I also saved Miranda. We are the reason the 3 most important people to you are still alive." And since he expected Gaz to prepare a respectable bribe for him, he cut him off and offered him a special piece of mithril, a very rare metal. Kyle had a large quantity of it in Selfie's storage. He told him he could give him as much as he wanted so he could make a sword better than the original one itself. Gaz was hesitant, especially since the matter would be politically complicated, but Miranda ended the discussion saying, "I have never seen this sacred sword before. You saw it and I didn't," and the matter was settled with Siren keeping the sword. Then Kyle said he needed Gaz to make something for him. Gaz looked at the drawings and said he could finish it in 3 days. Kyle said, "Okay, we have a deal. You have 2 days. Gaz said, 2 days is difficult, man. I can't do it. Kyle said, "You must finish in 2 days because I have a deal with the demons in 3 days, and the project must be ready before the battle." The task was very difficult to complete in 2 days, but Gaz saw that Kyle was his savior, so he immediately got up and started working without wasting time. When the day of the duel arrived, Siren was still relaxed and snoring, and Selfie was annoyed by his suspicious calmness. Kyle said, on the contrary, his calm means he is confident of victory. They arrived at the duel location and discovered they hadn't set a clear time, so the demons hadn't arrived yet. Liza and Werza spread a blanket on the ground and began preparing tea while waiting for them to arrive. After a while, they heard footsteps. The demons were entering. Kyle tried to look imposing while standing, but the situation wasn't very terrifying while he was holding a teacup and a biscuit, his mouth full. Everyone quickly stood up and Kyle said, "Let's finish this." He suggested moving his and Gen's fight to another location and Gen's agreed, but Rags asked him, "Are you sure? I won't be able to help you if things turn against you." Gen said confidently, "No demon loses to a weak human," and went out with Kyle to find a new arena. This time, Selfie didn't go with him, saying her role was to inform Kyle if anything happened. Rags asked them, "Are you ready then?" and assumed Siren would be the one to fight her, but he said he was just a spectator, and if they won he would leave the sacred sword for her. Werza didn't want to fight, but for the sake of the sword, she was forced. From the first second, she unleashed all her power and told the girls to surrender if they didn't want to die. Selfie was worried because their plan was based on Rags underestimating them, but Siren remained confident and said they would be fine. Rags attacked with insane speed and Liza barely blocked the strikes. Werza came to help her, but Rags dodged her attack, and Liza was cornered and forced to hide behind a pillar to avoid being burned. Then Rags attacked Werza, who tried to summon an earth spirit to protect her, but the attack was much stronger. Selfie became tense and asked Siren why he wasn't intervening to help. But he said the situation wasn't as difficult as it seemed. Liza and Werza had set a trap. They summoned a golem. Rags mocked them, saying it wouldn't stop her, but the plan was different. Liza ran and struck the golem quickly, hitting Rags in the chest while she was still shocked. Liza followed up with a second, stronger blow that confused her even more. At the same moment, Kyle and Gens had reached their new arena, and the match between them began. Meanwhile, Liza and Werza were still together, and Rags wasn't intending to let the blow she had taken slip. She ran towards Liza, trying to gouge her eye out, but instead she was thrown to the ground again, and Werza finished her off with a full-power fire strike from her fire spirit. The blow was so powerful that not even a demon could survive. After they finished, Liza and Werza high-fived each other. Rags told her spirits, "You can rest." Siren was happy they managed to stop Rags without his help, But Selfie sensed they didn't understand the situation correctly, and as they walked away happily after the victory, suddenly a shadow appeared amidst the fight. When they looked behind them, they found Rags standing before them, completely unharmed and without a scratch, her face very angry. She pointed at Liza and asked how she managed to escape her attacks when she knew her speed was much higher. The truth was that Rags had been repeating the same moves every time, and Liza had easily memorized her style. It also showed that Rags had never been in a real fight in her life before, so when someone did something unexpected, she would get confused and leave herself exposed. But after this, it was difficult for Rags to accept it. She sat down sad for a while from the criticism, but after thinking a bit, she admitted they were right. Liza and Werza were happy she understood and asked her if she was ready to continue what they had started. But the surprise was that she said, "I surrender." Siren and Selfie were shocked and thought she was deceiving them, but the truth was that she had really surrendered. At first she thought she had lost because she was holding back, but now she understood she had underestimated them too much. She wasn't afraid of death, but she had clear orders from the king to return alive, so if there was even a slight chance she might die, she had to stop fighting. It wasn't very enthusiastic, but it relieved Liza and Werza of a difficult confrontation. Then Rags asked them what they would do with her now that she had surrendered. Liza and Werza were confused because they hadn't considered such a situation. Liza suggested letting her go, but Siren refused, saying it wasn't right to set a demon free like that. Liza understood his point of view, but also felt it wasn't right to kill someone who had surrendered. Then she remembered that Kyle wanted to know information about the demon's infiltration of humans, so she asked Rags. But she said she only knew that she and Jens were the only ones who had been sent officially. After that, Rags offered to wait until Kyle returned as he might ask them for something. But Liza said, "You should leave here now." Rags agreed easily, but before she left, she formally introduced herself, saying she hoped to face them again someday. Liza was surprised by her manners and Selfie agreed, saying that in the past it was impossible for a demon to surrender to a human or speak to them respectfully. Let's cut from this scene and go to the other side, where Kyle was preparing to face Jens. Before starting, Jens asked him about his horn. Kyle said it was tied to his side, and if he won the battle, he would get it back. Jens was relieved to see that Kyle was indeed committed to the agreement, and they began preparing to attack. Kyle knew that Jens was skilled at striking from a distance, so his main goal was to get close quickly and end it. He cast strength and speed spells on himself and charged. Strangely, Jens didn't try to dodge at all. On the contrary, he let Kyle's sword pierce his arm. Once the sword was embedded, it became difficult for Kyle to defend, so Jens threw a magic orb at his chest. Kyle managed to protect his organs with magic, so it wasn't fatal, but about 4 of his ribs were broken, making fighting very difficult for him afterward. Kyle saw that Jens had changed from the last time he fought him and was no longer joking. He started fighting with all his strength from the beginning, unleashing dozens of magical explosions that Kyle found impossible to dodge. Kyle took a risk and went into the midst of the explosions to get closer, but his attack was blocked by a magical shield from Jens, who threw him far away onto the rocks. When he realized he was losing, he began to blackmail Jens with his horn, threatening to break it if he got close. Jens stopped for a moment because he was indeed concerned about his horn, but he wouldn't risk his life to preserve it. Kyle threw the horn into the air, and when Jens looked at it, Kyle lunged and stabbed him. Jens laughed and said, "That's the best you've gotten." But Kyle continued, pressing him until both of them passed through the wall and were about to fall into a pit of volcanic lava. Jens pulled back and threw more explosions at Kyle. Kyle took out a glass cup and threw it, covering Jens with a sticky white substance. Jens initially mocked him, saying this trick wouldn't stop him, but then he discovered he couldn't move. The substance was very sticky, created by Kyle, and once it stuck, it wasn't easy to remove. Then Kyle took out the chain that Gaz had made and wrapped it around Jens to ensure he wouldn't escape. Kyle brought the sword close to Genz's neck and told him to talk and tell the truth. The first thing he asked was whether it was true that the current Demon King didn't intend to fight humans. Jens, despite his hatred, was forced to admit that Rasa, the daughter of the previous Demon King, was the one in power now, and she indeed didn't want to fight humans. The reason was that those sent for infiltration were the result of pressure from warmongering demons within the demon army. But Rasa was trying to minimize human casualties as much as possible. Kyle interpreted that the warmongering group might be trying to overthrow Rasa to start a war, but Jen said Rasa's power was much greater, and no one could easily overthrow her, so she would likely remain in power. Kyle asked a final question and warned Jens to think before answering. "Have you heard of a demon with black wings and no horns who might be a candidate for the throne?" Jens said such talk was impossible. A demon's horn was his pride, and a demon without horns couldn't become king. Jens had never heard of anyone matching that description. Kyle was very disappointed to discover that Gens had no information about the hornless demon, which made his existence worthless to him. So Kyle prepared to finish him off. But Gens began to beg to save his life, saying that perhaps leader Rasa, the current demon king, might know something about this demon. Of course, it was impossible for a human to meet her under normal circumstances, but Gens offered to arrange a meeting with her for Kyle if he let him live. The offer intrigued Kyle, so he agreed and said, "As long as you honor the agreement and don't make a stupid move, I'll let you leave unharmed." All Gens was doing was buying time until his invisible doll reached him and finished off Kyle. But the moment Gens thought he had won, without even looking, Kyle sliced the doll in half with a single strike. Gens was shocked that Kyle knew about his ability, but this wasn't their first encounter in the future. Gens had caused him major problems before, but this time Kyle noticed a big difference. He felt that Gens's loyalty wasn't like before. In the days of the Great Invasion, his loyalty was absolute to the demon leader without any hesitation, whereas now it was clear that the current queen wasn't the one who started the Great Invasion, which opened a million questions in Kyle's mind. But regardless of all that, Kyle no longer saw any reason to let Gens live. With one leg, he threw him into the fire and sat watching his body burn. Demons were very strong, so dying in volcanic lava took a long time, and every second of it was torture. Kyle felt no pity, especially after what Gens had done to his friends in his past life. Gens's eyes began to melt as he cursed Kyle, which reminded Kyle of the last time he had defeated him. Back then, Gens had killed many of his loved ones, but after he was captured, he told them the location of the Demon King's castle, which allowed Kyle and the others to launch their final attack. Kyle remembered this and felt a slight sense of gratitude, so he said to him, "I'll set you free when the chains melt." But of course, the chains were made of mithril, and that wouldn't happen anytime soon. In the end, Gens drowned in the lava, his body completely melted away. Kyle walked away happily, having eliminated one of the biggest threats awaiting him in the future. After that, they returned to the city. Siren was holding the legendary sword, training with it day and night without stopping, getting excited about trying it in a real fight, especially since he hadn't fought demons yet. While talking to him, Kyle asked, "So what's your opinion of these demons?" Siren admitted that at first, he was very afraid of them because of the stories he heard about them being terrifying monsters. But when he faced them, he discovered that while they were strong, they weren't as scary as he had imagined. Kyle felt the same way, because when he met Rags, she was civilized in her speech and behavior, which was probably why Siren let her go then, even though Kyle had told him to finish her off, as she wasn't a direct threat anymore. After a while, Liza and Werza came out to Kyle and Siren. Kyle asked how they were doing. Liza said they had seen a doctor, and there were no serious injuries. Kyle and Selfie went to Gaz's house, and Joe greeted them outside the house, saying that Gaz was waiting for them in the As they were entering, Selfie stopped to talk to him about something, so Kyle entered alone to see Gaz. There, his condition had improved compared to before, even though he had been working beyond his capacity days ago to prepare Kyle's chain on. Gaz had heard that Kyle and his friends were traveling, so he offered them a farewell gift. 2 sword sheaths, one for Kyle's sword and another for Siren's sword. Kyle was very happy with them because until now, he had been wrapping Selfie in cloth while traveling. Also, the sheaths were made of strong mithril metal. After that, Kyle and his friends left Karn and returned to Zergos to present their report. Liza and Werza were worried because the relationship between Zergos and Gargon had hit zero after everything that happened, especially with the death of an important figure from the Empire, which would surely increase tension. But Kyle said he wouldn't allow that. The demons were clearly preparing something big, and if they decided to attack soon, the only solution for humans was to cooperate. At that time in Zergos, Melina received a report that the Gargon Empire was urgently demanding the attendance of the 3 princesses at a peace conference after the embassy incident. The situation was very critical, so Melina decided to let August and Kieran handle the matter. Meanwhile, in Kyle's village, his mother was hanging laundry when suddenly she wondered what Kyle was doing now. Then Ella came to visit her and said she was going out on a mission and would greet Kyle if she met him on the way. Let's return to Kyle. He and his friends, while returning to the capital, were surprised by carriages waiting for them on the road, with August and Kieran standing to receive them. The story in short was that they came to ask for Kyle and the others' help in the peace conference. After they explained the situation, everyone boarded the carriages. Siren and Liza were sitting together in one carriage, and Siren was happy they had saved them the journey. But their sitting was boring, so they decided to play cards. Meanwhile, Kyle wasn't with them. He was in the carriage ahead, sitting with August and Kieran, very nervous. As soon as they started talking, Kieran thanked Kyle for speaking on their behalf at the peace conference. Kyle replied, "The matter isn't that big for me. I'm sure the massacre in Gargon was the work of demons, and I personally killed one of them and can testify that Zergos had nothing to do with the attack. After a few days of travel, Kyle and his group finally arrived at the Gargon Empire. Kyle was excited because he might meet someone important there. Inside the Gargon Palace, the royal family was discussing the Gargon massacre. Although Zergo said it was the work of demons, people found it hard to believe because demons hadn't been seen for over 300 years. Zergos also said that the one who killed the demon responsible for the massacre was on his way. The others thought this was an attempt by Zergos to undermine the Empire's authority, but Meiser wasn't upset and said that Zergos might be telling the truth because there were rumors about a new hero appearing. They asked him if he had any evidence, and he replied, "No, it's a feeling." But Meiser's feelings were usually correct, so his words were enough. Night fell. Kyle and his friends arrived at the Gargon capital and were invited inside the palace. Siren found a girl he liked. Kyle went outside to get some air and found a woman of stunning beauty sitting by the fountain, and it appeared she intended to chat with him, and perhaps something more might happen, but we don't know yet. Then Prince Meiser arrived and pulled the woman away to have a private chat with Kyle. Meiser was frank and asked Kyle if he was prepared to serve him. Kyle was going to refuse politely, as he had when Melina asked him before, but Meiser cut him off and said bluntly, "If you won't serve me, I might have to eliminate you here and now." Meiser saw Kyle as very dangerous and skilled and knew he couldn't let him do as he pleased, so if he wouldn't be an ally, it was better to eliminate him before he became an enemy. Let's cut from this scene and go to Rags, who was kneeling before the Demon Queen, telling her that everything that happened was her fault, that they had lost Gens, and that she would accept any punishment she decreed. And so we end the anime with the appearance of the Demon Queen, concluding the season on this note. As soon as the new season is released, you will find it here on the channel, God willing. So if you liked the video, don't forget to like and subscribe. See you in the next video.